It was my 70th birthday, and the last thing I expected was to hear those words from my own son. I had just finished telling my family how grateful I was for their support, how thankful I was to still be here with them, surrounded by love. And then, as if everything I had lived for, everything I had done for them, suddenly meant nothing, he said it. "You've outlived your usefulness." I froze. The room went silent. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked around, expecting someone to stand up, to say something, but no one did. They just stared at me, waiting, like they were expecting me to react. But how do you react to something like that? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. The table was set. The cake was placed in the center with "Happy 70th" written in bold icing. The laughter and chatter filled the room, but there was an air of tension I couldn't shake. I had worked so hard for this moment. My kids, my grandkids, all gathered under one roof. It wasn't every day I got to see them all in one place. I was proud of how far we had come. I'd spent my life giving my all to this family. I raised them on my own when my husband passed away too early. I worked 2 jobs, missed holidays, and sacrificed so much to ensure they had everything they needed. And now, as I sat there, I felt an odd sense of peace. This was supposed to be a moment of celebration. But then my son, Greg, spoke. He was sitting across from me, his eyes not meeting mine as he fiddled with his glass. "Mom, you've outlived your usefulness." His voice was cold, calculated, almost as if he had rehearsed it. I couldn't even grasp the weight of what he'd just said. It didn't make sense. He couldn't be serious. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't playful banter. It was a statement. I blinked, feeling the sting of those words cut through me like a blade. "What do you mean by that, Greg?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The room went silent. My daughter Emily exchanged a quick glance with her husband, and the kids, who had been laughing moments earlier, now seemed to shrink into themselves. Greg didn't answer right away. He took a sip from his glass, his fingers trembling slightly, then let out a sigh. "Come on, Mom. You can't keep pretending everything is fine," he said, his tone barely above a whisper, but still loud enough to pierce the air. "You've been slowing down. You need help, and frankly, it's getting to be too much. It's time for you to step aside and let someone else take care of things." The words felt like a slap across my face. I had always prided myself on being strong, independent, and capable. But there it was. My own son, telling me I was no longer needed. Telling me my time had passed. I looked around the room, hoping someone would speak up, but no one did. It was as if they had all expected this moment. Maybe they knew something I didn't. My daughter-in-law, Mary, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and I could feel her gaze lingering on me, a mix of pity and something else I couldn't quite identify. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. "Greg, I don't understand. What are you talking about? I've always been here for you. I've always been there for this family." Greg looked at me, his eyes hardening. "You were, Mom, but it's not enough anymore. You're not the same. You can't do the things you used to. We're all just trying to move forward, and honestly, you're holding us back." His words hit me like a wave. I felt the weight of his disappointment crashing over me, and yet there was a part of me that refused to believe it. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not on my birthday. The silence in the room was deafening. It felt as though the walls were closing in on me. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I wasn't going to let him see how much his words had hurt me. I wasn't going to let him see how much they made me question everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed. "Greg, please," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I've spent my whole life giving to this family. Everything I did for you." He didn't respond. Instead, he turned away from me, staring out the window, as if he regretted saying anything at all. But it was too late. The damage was done. I stood up slowly, trying to gather my thoughts, to pull myself together. I wasn't going to let this be my story, my ending, but how could I ignore what he had said? How could I ignore the truth in his words? The way he saw me now. I turned to Emily, hoping she would come to my defense, but she just looked at me with a sad, apologetic smile. "Mom, maybe he's right," she said softly. "You've been struggling lately. It's okay to admit you need help." Those words hit me harder than anything Greg had said. My own daughter telling me I wasn't enough, that I couldn't do it anymore. It felt like the walls were collapsing around me and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had always been strong, but now I don't know who I was anymore. The woman who had raised them, who had fought through every hardship, who had stood tall no matter the challenge. Was she really gone? Or was she just fading away, replaced by someone no one needed anymore? I walked to the window, staring out at the world I had built, wondering if it was all crumbling beneath me. The weight of Greg's words lingered, haunting me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure how to find my way back. How had I become this invisible? How had I let my own son, the one I had given everything for, make me feel like I didn't matter? I stood at the window, staring out at the world, lost in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The house felt too quiet now, the voices from the party no longer filling the air with the warmth they had just moments ago. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. I tried to steady my breathing, but the words Greg had said echoed in my mind, repeatedly. "You've outlived your usefulness." The phrase clung to the air like smoke. It was impossible to shake off. I turned away from the window and walked slowly toward the kitchen. My hands were trembling as I opened the cupboard and reached for a glass. I poured some water on myself, but the cold liquid did nothing to quell the dryness in my throat. My reflection in the kitchen window caught my eye, and I paused. For the first time in years, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked older, worn. There were wrinkles around her eyes, lines that hadn't been there before, and a sorrow that seemed to sink deep into her bones. A sudden knock at the door made me jump, breaking the moment of stillness. I quickly wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. I wasn't ready to face anyone, not after what had just happened. But the knocking continued, persistent, impatient. I walked to the door, and when I opened it, Emily was standing there, her expression soft but filled with unreadable concern. She wasn't smiling, and for the first time I noticed how much she had changed. Her eyes were tired, like she carried something heavy behind them, something she wasn't telling me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, stepping inside before I could respond. She closed the door behind her and turned to face me, her gaze now filled with a hint of guilt. I nodded slowly, uncertain of what was coming. I didn't know if I could handle more of this today. We both stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment hanging heavily between us. I took a deep breath, my voice shaky but firm. "You heard what he said." Emily's lips parted as if she were about to say something, but then she closed them again, seemingly unsure. She fidgeted with her hands, her fingers twisting together in a nervous gesture. "I heard," she finally whispered. I nodded again, trying to mask the pain I was feeling. "Why didn't you say anything, Emily? You've been quiet through all of this. Even you think I'm no longer needed, don't you?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. A deep, hollow ache spread through me as I saw the look in her eyes. She wasn't angry, like Greg. She wasn't cruel. But there was something else that I hadn't expected. Regret. "I don't think that at all," she said softly, her voice barely audible. She reached out and placed a hand on my arm, her touch gentle but firm. "But I think you've been struggling in ways that none of us really saw. You've been giving too much of yourself, Mom. You've been holding on to things that aren't yours to hold." I pulled away from her, not out of anger, but because her words hit too close to home. It felt as though she were telling the truth I wasn't ready to hear, a truth I didn't want to admit to myself. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is it that I've been holding on to? What do you think I should let go of?" Emily sighed and took a step back. She gazed down at her feet for a moment, like she was trying to find the right words, the ones that wouldn't shatter me further. Maybe it's time to let go of this house, she said, her voice quieter now. And everything in it. My heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt for a second. I had worked so hard to create this home, to fill it with memories of Robert, of the family we had built together. How could she ask me to let it go? But I could see the hesitation in her eyes. I could feel the weight of the decision she was placing on my shoulders, even though she wasn't saying it outright. She was giving me an out, a reason to leave it all behind. And for a moment, I wondered if I should. Let go of everything? I echoed, my voice thick with disbelief. This house, it's all I have left of him, all I have left of the life we built together. I know, Emily said, nodding gently, but sometimes holding on too tightly to the past makes it harder to move forward. We don't want to see you hurt anymore, Mom. She was right. I had been holding on, too tight, and now I was being asked to face the truth that I had been avoiding for so long. What if I was becoming a burden? What if I had outlived my usefulness just as Greg had so cruelly pointed out? I didn't want to hear it, but the truth was undeniable. I just need some time, I said, my voice barely audible. I need time to think about all of this. Emily nodded once more, her expression softening with understanding. Of course, Mom, take all the time you need, but just know that we're here for you. As she left, I stood there in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I thought I had built a life I could be proud of, but now I wasn't so sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. The door clicked shut behind her, and I felt the emptiness rush in. Was this truly my life now? The silence was louder than any argument, and the uncertainty louder than any sound in the house. But there was one thing I knew for sure: things were never going to be the same again. And as the night crept in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to make a decision that would change everything. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the stillness of the room. I didn't recognize the number. Hesitating, I picked it up. "Hello," I said, my voice tight. "Alice, it's Martin Reynolds," came the calm, steady voice on the other end. "We need to talk." I felt a chill run down my spine. What could he want? I wasn't ready for what he was about to tell me. The phone's sudden ring shattered the quiet in the room, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my body. I stared at it for a moment, unsure of whether I wanted to answer. The unknown caller seemed like another reminder of the mess I was tangled in. But I had to. I couldn't keep running from the truths that were closing in on me. "Alice, it's Martin Reynolds." The voice on the other end was steady, but there was something about it, something in his tone, that set my nerves on edge. "We need to talk." His words hung in the air, suffocating me. Martin was Robert's lawyer, the one who handled all our finances after he passed. He had been the one to guide me through the complexities of Robert's estate, ensuring everything was settled just as Robert had intended. But this was different. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer. I wasn't sure if I could handle any more bad news. There was a long pause, the kind that only deepens your fear. Then Martin spoke again, his voice low, almost hesitant. "It's about the will, Alice," he said. "There's something you need to know, something that's going to change everything." I felt my heart skip a beat. The will? What more could there possibly be? I had already gone through it all, signed all the papers. What could Martin be holding back? "I don't understand," I replied, my breath coming quicker now. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," he said, "but you need to come to my office. This is urgent. I'll be expecting you." I didn't have to be told twice. I hung up the phone and grabbed my coat. I couldn't even remember the last time I had been to Martin's office. It felt like a lifetime ago. But as I walked out the door and into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something I couldn't undo. The drive to his office felt like a blur. The roads, usually familiar, seemed unfamiliar now. I couldn't focus on anything except the unease bubbling inside me. What did Martin mean by change everything? What could he possibly have to say that would make a difference now, after everything? When I arrived, the office building was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt oppressive. I walked into the lobby, and the receptionist gave me a polite nod, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. She knew something was off. She could feel the tension in the air, just as I did. I sat in the waiting area, my hands trembling slightly as I tapped my foot against the floor. I didn't know how long I had been waiting when Martin finally walked in, his face pale, his expression serious. "Alice," he greeted me, his voice tight. "Thank you for coming." I stood up, trying to steady my breath, but I could feel the dread creeping up on me. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. "What's going on, Martin? Why is this so urgent?" He hesitated for a moment, then motioned for me to sit. I took a seat across from his desk, trying to mask my anxiety. He sat down too, his hands folded in front of him. "There's a problem," he said quietly. "A problem with the will." I froze. I had expected many things, but not this. Not a problem. "What do you mean, a problem?" I whispered, my voice cracking. He took a deep breath, clearly unsure of how to say it. "Robert added something to the will just before he passed, something I wasn't aware of until recently. It's a clause, a provision." I stared at him, my mind racing. "A clause? What kind of clause?" Martin leaned forward, his eyes locking mine. "It's called a codicil. It's a stipulation that affects the inheritance." A chill ran through me. I knew the word. I had heard it mentioned once, in passing, but I hadn't understood its importance. "A codicil?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "What does it do?" Martin's eyes shifted, as if weighing whether to tell me more. "It's a clause that stipulates if any of the descendants of Robert's estate publicly humiliate or disrespect you, they forfeit their inheritance. They lose everything." I blinked, processing his words. The room seemed to spin for a moment. I thought I had heard him wrong. I had to have. "What are you saying? That Greg and Emily—" "Yes," Martin interrupted, his voice grave. "That's exactly what I'm saying. Greg's actions at the party, his words qualify. Emily's silence, her complicity, it all adds up." My head swam. The weight of it all was too much. "Are you telling me that if I choose to enforce this, they lose everything? Everything?" I asked, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Martin nodded slowly, his eyes full of regret. "It's not a decision to take lightly, Alice. It's a drastic step. But Robert put this clause in place because he wanted to protect you, to make sure you were never disrespected or taken advantage of, especially by the ones closest to you." I was stunned into silence. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in on me. Was this really happening? Could I really make a choice that would sever my relationship with my own children forever? Before I could gather my thoughts, Martin spoke again. "There's more, Alice. There's another part of the will I need to show you. Something you may not be prepared for." My heart raced. What could be more than this? What was he not telling me? "I think you should sit down for this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The door behind me opened with a quiet creak. I didn't even have time to turn before the cold, familiar voice cut through the tension in the room. "Did you really think you could do this without me?" I spun around, my heart pounding. Greg stood in the doorway, his eyes cold and calculating, a smirk playing on his lips. "Greg?" I whispered, my throat dry. "How did you—" His smirk widened. "I think we have a lot to talk about, Mom." And just like that, I realized this was no longer just about a will. This was about power, control, and the family I thought I knew. I could feel the blood drain from my face as Greg's cold gaze locked onto mine. His smug expression felt like a slap. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it while the rest of us were blissfully unaware. Martin's face, which had been full of concern moments ago, now looked resigned. He glanced at Greg, then back at me, as if silently calculating what to do next. I was still trying to process the shock of what I'd just learned, a codicil. And now Greg was standing in front of me like a shadow over my entire life. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Greg, how long have you been planning this?" I asked, and my words felt hollow. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a self-assured smirk curling on his lips. "Planning what, Mom? I'm just here for the truth. Martin," he said, nodding towards the lawyer, "has been keeping things from you. He doesn't want you to know the full picture." Martin stiffened in his chair, a subtle sign that Greg had crossed a line. But I could feel a deeper unease creeping in. What did he mean by the full picture? "You're right, Alice," Martin finally spoke, his voice reluctant. "There's something else you should know about the will." I felt a knot twist in my stomach. More? What could be worse than what I'd already heard? I looked back at Greg, who stood there with that smug, infuriating confidence, and my resolve started to shift. What was he after? What had he been plotting all along? Martin's voice broke through my thoughts. "There's more to the clause, Alice. It's not just about humiliation. If it's enforced, it's also about control." Greg's smirk faded slightly, but his eyes glinted with something darker. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way he clenched his fists at his sides, like a man fighting to keep his composure. "What kind of control?" I asked, dread tightening in my chest. Martin took a deep breath. "Robert left behind instructions that if the codicil is triggered, the family's entire fortune would be reallocated. Not just the inheritance. I was at risk of losing everything Robert and I had built together." Greg's voice broke the silence, his words dripping with malicious intent. "It's funny, isn't it, Mom? You think you have control, but you don't. You never did. You never were really a part of the future. You've outlived your usefulness, and now it's time for the real players to take the reins." He paused, the words hanging heavily in the air. "And I plan to take what's rightfully mine." My breath caught. It felt like the world was slipping away from me, unraveling thread by thread. How could my own son say something like this? How could he be so ruthless, so cold? He wasn't the person I raised. But maybe I hadn't really seen him. Not in the way I thought I had. The man standing before me wasn't the boy who once hugged me tightly after a long day of school, the boy I fought to give everything to. "This isn't you, Greg," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're not the person I raised." He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was empty. "You raised me to be strong, didn't you? To take care of business? Well, this is my business, Mom. This is our future." I couldn't breathe. I had given so much to this family, spent my life supporting them, trying to make sure they had everything they needed. And this was how they repaid me. With betrayal, with the cold reality that everything I thought was safe, everything I had fought for could be ripped away in an instant. I turned to Martin, my hands shaking as I clutched the back of the chair. "What do I do, Martin?" I asked, my voice small, desperate. "I can't lose everything. I can't—" "You don't have to decide right now," Martin said, his voice cautious but firm. "The decision is yours, Alice. You can enforce the clause and remove them from the will, but know that once you do, there's no going back, no undoing it." I was paralyzed, the weight of it all settled on my shoulders, crushing me. I had spent my life sacrificing for them, and now I was faced with the decision of whether to let them have everything or to stand up for myself and risk losing it all. "Mom," Greg interrupted, stepping forward with a look of contempt in his eyes. "The choice is simple. You either let us take over or you stay in the past and lose everything, but you can't have both." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how wrong he was. But I also knew that something inside me had shifted. He had pushed me to the edge, and I was starting to see their truth. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. I turned slowly, taking in the weight of the moment. I felt the heavy burden of my decision pressing on me. "You don't understand, Greg," I said, my voice low but steady now. "You don't get to take everything. Not anymore. His face twisted into a sneer, but I stood firm. I had spent too long trying to be the peacekeeper, the one who held everything together. But no more. Before Greg could respond, the door to the office swung open. A figure stood in the doorway, a silhouette I hadn't expected. "Actually," the new voice said, "I think we have another problem." I turned toward the door, my heart leap into my throat. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dim office light, there was none other than Emily. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stepped inside. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible, "there's something you need to know." I felt the blood rush from my face. What now? The room was heavy with the weight of Emily's words. I had already felt the ground beneath me shift with Greg's revelations, but now, with Emily standing in the doorway, her face pale and uncertain, I felt the very foundation of my life begin to crack. "Mom," she whispered again, her voice shaky, "there's something you need to know." I could barely breathe. The words I had feared, the ones I had been avoiding, were finally coming to the surface. Greg stood across from me, his expression darkening as he crossed his arms, a faint sneer still lingering on his lips. "What is it, Emily?" I asked, and my voice weak. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the tension rising as the seconds ticked by. I needed to know what was happening, why all of this was happening. Emily stepped into the room, her eyes darting between Greg and me. She hesitated for a moment, almost as if she was trying to find the right words to break the silence. "I didn't want to say anything, but I can't keep this from you anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Greg, he's been hiding something from you, something that goes beyond the will." My stomach dropped. What more could there be? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, but the pieces didn't fit. Greg's eyes flickered with irritation as he took a step forward, but Emily held up her hand, stopping him. "Just hear me out, Greg, please." Greg scoffed, rolling his eyes. "What's this? Another attempt to protect her?" he sneered, but Emily ignored him. "I found something," Emily continued, her voice trembling. "A document that wasn't in the will, but it's just as important. I didn't want to believe it at first, but now I have no choice." I felt my pulse quicken. A document? What was she talking about? I glanced at Martin, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. It was as though he had been waiting for this moment. "What document?" I asked, my voice barely whisper. "What are you talking about?" Emily stepped closer, taking a deep breath before handing me a folded piece of paper. I took it from her, my hands shaking as I unfolded it. My eyes scanned the words, each sentence sending a chill down my spine. It was another provisional clause that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't a part of the original will, but it was signed by Robert, just before his death. The document outlined an even deeper level of control, something far more sinister than anything I had imagined. "I don't understand," I whispered, my eyes scanning the text. The words were clear but heavy, like a warning. It said that if anyone in the family attempted to challenge the inheritance in any way, or if their actions caused a public scandal, the estate could be seized by an external party, a third-party entity that Robert had entrusted with control in case of such an event. Greg's smug expression faltered as he saw the panic in my eyes. "No," he said, shaking his head, "that's not—" "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why didn't you—" Greg took a step back, his face paling as the reality of the situation began to sink in. "You don't understand, Mom. It wasn't meant to be like this." I turned to Martin, the lawyer who had been so steady before. "Is this true? Is this part of the will? Did Robert really do this?" Martin looked away, his silence more telling than anything he could have said. "Yes, Alice," he finally murmured, his voice heavy. "Robert was concerned. He didn't trust the family to keep his legacy intact. He wanted to ensure that, in the event of a scandal, the estate would be protected. I didn't want to burden you with this, but now—" I felt the air leave my lungs. Robert had always been protective, but this was beyond anything I had ever imagined. I didn't know, Greg spat, his voice defensive. I didn't know anything about this clause. I interrupted him, my mind spinning. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? All this time you've been playing the game, trying to take what's mine, what's ours. And now, when it comes down to it, you're trying to tear this family apart. Greg opened his mouth to retort, but the words stuck in his throat. Emily stepped in, her hand trembling as she reached for my arm. Mom, I swear I didn't know about this either. I only found out because I was going through some old papers of Robert's, and that's when I found the clause. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to tell you. I stood there, unable to speak. My head was spinning. The trust I had placed in my family, my own flesh and blood, was shattered in an instant. I had spent my life building something, protecting it, and now it was all slipping through my fingers. For the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me, familiar yet foreign. You think this is over, Alice? I turned around, my heart racing. Standing in the doorway, there was none other than Mary, Greg's wife. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but there was something in her expression I couldn't quite place. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. There's something you need to know too. Greg isn't the only one who's been hiding things. I froze, the room growing even colder. Another secret? What do you mean? I whispered, barely able to breathe. Mary took a deep breath as if preparing to reveal something earth-shattering. I'm afraid there's something far worse than you think, and it's all tied to the estate. I felt a cold sweat break out across my back. What could possibly be worse than this? Mary's words echoed in my head as the tension in the room mounted, and for the first time, I realized just how deep the betrayal went. The family I had built, the life I had spent decades creating, was no longer mine, and it was all falling apart before my eyes.